If small businesses are not losing top talent because they care too little, but because their rewards and retention decisions are improvised and they just lose trust. Welcome to the People Strategy Forum. I'm Sam Reeve, your host and CEO of CompTeam, where we help organizations design people-centered systems that attract and keep top performers. The topic today is retention rewards for small business. And our guest is Greg Roche, founder of Retention and Rewards Partners. So Greg helps companies improve engagement and retention by teaching leaders how compensation, connection, and day-to-day management decisions shape whether people stay. With a background in HR and in total rewards, Greg brings a practical lens for companies that are too large to wing it, but too lean to have deep internal compensation resources. Greg is also the author of The Fast and Easy Guide to Networking for Introverts and a frequent speaker based in Denver, Colorado. So this conversation matters because so many growing businesses out there think that they're competitive, fair, and connected to their people, only to learn that those assumptions are costing them trust, retention, and performance. So we're going to talk about those issues and deeply here with Greg. So welcome, Greg.
Thanks for having me on, Sam.
You bet. So one of the top things, Greg, I mean, we start with in these conversations is just, you've been on the People Strategy before, but a lot of people may this might be the first time. So how did you get into a compensation in HR? Can you kind of give us your backstory there?
I got into it the way most people do, by accident.
Yeah.
I was working at a company and in operations for a few years, doing a lot of analytics. And a friend of mine was in HR and said, "Hey, have you ever thought about being in HR?" And I said, "No, not really." And he said, "We got a great role over here. Come on over, check it out." So I started doing that. And honestly, my first role, I was the director of retention. So my role was to figure out how to keep people in the company. And I might be the only person who's ever had that job title. I haven't ever met anybody else who was just focused on retention. I think a lot of companies make that everybody's job and they think that should be what everybody does, but it's kind of one of those things like if everybody's doing it, then nobody's doing it. So I was focused on what are we doing in HR to make sure we're keeping people. And then over time that role evolved and I moved into analytics, HRAS. I moved into compensation and benefits and then kind of took on that total rewards leadership role. And over time, as my career progressed, it really focused on the total rewards, but I never really kind of forgot that retention role that I had because in total rewards, especially in compensation, you get that experience of the manager or the leader coming into your office on Monday morning saying, "We got to make a counteroffer because, my top performer is resigning. They have an offer from somebody else. So we got to put together the counter." And usually after, you do that several dozen times, you get enough sort of courage to speak up and say to that leader, "We can do this and we'll do our best." But the honest truth is that person's already gone. The fact that they handed you an offer means they are emotionally checked out and gone. And I think sometimes counteroffers get people to stay in the short term, but we all know that down the road, they're probably going to head out anyway. So that whole experience really kind of shaped my thinking around compensation is important. Benefits are important. Total rewards are important. You got to have a certain level to compete in the market. And it's not the only thing that's going to keep people at your organization.
Yeah, that's one thing I found early on as well when I started consulting. It's I started in some larger organizations like Barclays and BlackRock. Then I came into consulting and I found that these strategies that work in big companies don't necessarily work everywhere. And that there is the important piece is that there's a whole infrastructure of rewards that support whether pay works or not. And so, and I kind of coined that as the workforce experience. And so What were those things that you did in your retention role that got in front of the problem before people start thinking about leaving?
We had to figure out who was leaving because a lot of times companies will track retention or turnover. And so it's a really simple measure. It's how many people left over the average head count over a period of time. And is that going up or down? But that doesn't tell you anything about the who.
Hmm.
What we found in that first role I was in, we were breaking it down in a lot of different ways. This was a long time ago, really early days of HR analytics. And what we were trying to do was segment where people were in the employee experience, maybe in the life cycle of being an employee, and tracking turnover for 90-day turnover, 180-day turnover, 1 year turnover, multiple years after that. In that particular example, when we broke that down, we found a huge turnover or huge churn in the 90-day turnover. So what that tells you is, okay, this is probably, in this situation, not really a pay issue because the person accepted the offer 90 days ago.
Right.
You said, here's what the job is, here's what the job pays. And they said, okay. What we learned was the problem was the job they thought they were accepting was not the job they were doing when they showed up at work in those 90 days. So we had to disconnect between what the job really does and what we were selling the job as in the recruiting process. So that was a mismatch of talent acquisition. And it wasn't that the recruiters were doing anything wrong. They were doing what the managers were telling them this job was. But in reality, the job was totally different when you showed up on site. And that was what we started to hear when we started to ask that question, when we looked at those numbers and we said, we got to get really, really honest with candidates about what this is going to be. And what that did is it totally changed the candidates we were going after. But when we did that, we got people who wanted to do the job that actually existed, and we were able to just drive that turnover rate down, which impacted the overall turnover rate. So the key thing in this idea of retaining people is who are the people, and because it's a different intervention depending on who it is.
Yeah.
Now, if it's somebody who's a couple years into their career and they're leaving, maybe that's a internal mobility issue. Maybe there's no career pathway, there's no development, or it could be a compensation issue that you're not keeping up with the market. But until you really get clear on who it is, it's really hard to figure out what you need to do about it.
Right. I love that because, a lot of times, when you talk to leaders and they have a problem that comes up with retention, the first thing they say is, oh, we must not be paying enough. But, really diagnosing the problem, as you say, is the important part, really figuring out. Now, another thing that I've also found is in working with companies is that, I start off in our first meetings, I bring together, I say, okay, well, here is what you're telling your candidates and what your compensation policy is and what your workforce experience is like. And they're like, well, how did you get this stuff? We haven't shared anything with you. It's like it's on your website. And a lot of the times they that's the first time that they've experienced or they haven't even looked at the website themselves. It's just marketing language that was put together like years ago. But all their candidates are going there and looking at that stuff, and that's what it's setting their expectations, right? So these are the things that are important.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to have marketing. It's okay to try to attract people with things, but it's got to be close to the real experience. I know the concern a lot of time. Let's take benefits as an example. Because a lot of companies will say, here's all of our benefits, here's what we do. And some companies will even go so far as, people can access the plan design and all that information. And oftentimes people think, well, we don't want to do that because people might say, well, those benefits aren't strong enough, or you don't have the benefit I want. And it's like, you don't want that person anyway, because it's, you might hire them, but they're going to figure it out. They're not going to be happy. They're going to leave and you're going to be recruiting this role again. So getting really transparent and honest, it is uncomfortable for a lot of people. And at the same time, you're probably going to help yourself in the long run if you can get honest there. I think that happens in compensation. We can jump to compensation because a lot of my clients, I'll say, hey, what's your point of view on pay? Like, let's talk base pay, right? And where do you want to be positioned to the market? Well, the number one answer, the only answer everybody knows is I want to be at the 50th percentile. We want to be right at the median of the market. And I mean, I've seen surveys and studies and stuff, and it's like if you survey leaders, that's all they'll say, because that's all they know. All they know is like, that sounds safe. That means that we're not too high and we're overspending. We're not too low and behind the market. But the reality is that really what you need? And is that really, it's so much more complicated than just that number. But most leaders, I don't think, and a lot of even HR leaders, I don't think even understand, what does that mean to be at the 50th percentile of the market? And what does that actually look like in practice? And is there the idea that if that's your average or your median or however you want to measure it, well, you've got people above and below, so there's more nuance there. And is that really the target you want? And I've had some clients who said, yeah, that's exactly what we do. And we go in and we go, okay, well, let's, when was the last time you looked at market data? It's been a couple of years. Okay, let's do some market analysis. Let's look at the market data. They're like at the 40th percentile, or in some cases even lower. And they're like, well, what happened? I was like, well, you haven't been tracking the market. You haven't seen how this has moved. And by the way, are you having turnover issues? No. Are you having talent acquisition issues? No. Do you have the talent you need to run the business? Yeah, pretty much. Okay. Then you probably don't require the 50th percentile of the market in order to run your business. So if you're shooting for that target, you're inflating your costs unnecessarily. Now, there's exceptions always, right? There's going to be somebody that's underpaid. You got to fix those things. But it's getting into those deeper details that most organizations, and you put it so perfectly in your introduction there, they're big enough to have this problem, but they don't have anybody that can help them out with that. And when you kind of go in and you start to teach them and educate them and kind of break this down and get into the nuance, they really go, oh, okay, that's okay. That makes more sense. Or, oh, here's exactly where we need to invest our money. We don't just need to go across the board and bump everybody up. We just need to invest the money in certain places. So I think that's where people underestimate the compensation function and what it can do to kind of help give you better direction on what you want to do in terms of talent, workforce, all those sort of things, so that the business can function. The business isn't going over its expenses, but it's still getting the talent it needs to drive the top line revenue.
I think you're exactly right. I mean, one of the biggest mistakes that I see that small business leaders make is that as they grow, they think that, oh, well, we got this compensation thing down. We've been paying people around this range for a while, not realizing that their business is becoming more complex, not realizing that as each time they hire a new person, they're growing this most expensive cost point of their business, paying people. And that saving a percentage point here and there, doing some strategic moves can save millions, and then actually help people be more satisfied in the work that they do, feel like that they're being treated fairly. And so it's just that's the importance of bringing in an expert to the organization to ensure that they really know how to leverage some of these hidden things that are not quite known by just general practitioners.
Yep. Yeah. And I spent a lot of my career in corporate roles, so doing the compensation function or total rewards function. So those were all companies that had said within HR, we want to have somebody that only focuses on this. And so people would come to us and it was kind of a foregone conclusion. You go to compensation, you work with them. It wasn't just like, go get an answer, but we worked with leaders, and it was always teaching people, right? So teaching them how to think about this, teaching them what the dynamics of pay are, teaching them how to communicate pay. And then when I started doing my own consulting and started getting my own clients, those were sort of those companies that they kind of knew that they needed help, but they didn't know how to go get that help. And so that was really, that's one of the things I really like about the consulting piece of this is I always have different clients in different spaces, different sort of issues and problems. So it's always something new. It's always something kind of fresh and a new issue or a new challenge to tackle. But it also allows me to help educate the HR leadership or the business leadership on these sort of things. And they're usually like, man, I never really knew all that. I didn't realize it was that in depth. There was like so much detail behind it. And you're like, yeah, well, that's why companies who have, billion-dollar payrolls and stuff are getting somebody in here to make sure that, that 1 percentage point is something that, they don't let slip because, then when we're talking, $10 million, right? So it's a big number. The numbers get big real quick in bigger companies.
And so a lot of the people that are in the audience right now that are listening in are leaders of small to mid-sized companies that are, maybe they have a small HR department and so forth. So in your experience, Greg, I mean, what is the point to where you see that organizations start needing this compensation expertise, this advanced knowledge to come in to really help them? Is there, in your experience, is it an employee size or what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, employee size is a good proxy for it because, if you're under, 50 people, everybody there's probably one person in each role. You're not like comparing a lot of people to each other, and it's more manageable there. As you start to get in over 100, a couple hundred, few hundred, then it really becomes a lot more important because you've got, departments of people doing things. You've got people, probably more hires than you normally would at those lower employee counts. I think it just kind of depends on, what the problem is. I've worked with some clients that are like 100 people, but they needed a new incentive plan for their sales team. Right. And it wasn't like commission-based plan. So this wasn't sales comp. It was really a quarterly incentive plan where they just didn't feel like they had the right metrics in previous years. They felt like they were paying a lot for average performance.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that case, that impacted like 10 people, but it was sort of one of their highest priorities is to get that right because number one, they needed those people to be focused on the goals, to hit the goals, to make the money, to drive the revenue. And at the same time, they needed to do it in a way that it wasn't going to, be so hard for them to achieve it that they were like, I'm going to quit and go somewhere else. This is too hard. So I think it kind of depends on what the situation is, but usually most of the clients I work with are, 100, couple hundred people, and some clients up to like, a few thousand, but it just kind of depends on how they're set up.
Right.
And again, sometimes they'll have lots of HR people, lots of HR generalists, but nobody that's really specializing in comp, and they don't, those individuals might be interested in comp, but they don't have the time to go learn it and sort of get all that knowledge because they have day jobs, right? And so it's they need the help now. Those people have a day job. They do comp on the side of their desks, so they're trying, but somebody like me can kind of help get them ramped up quickly or show them here's the things you really need to focus on. Here's the important things. Put some structure, some process in place, and then, they can continue to monitor and keep it up over time. So I think that's the space where I find a lot of people really appreciate having somebody come in and say, like, just get us squared away on comp, help us out, help us know where we are, give us some ideas of how to continue doing this over time, and then our team can help maintain it.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, it's just sometimes there's organizations that need the long-term support and the year after year updates of their structure and so forth. And then others, of course, just want to be trained up so that they can get the internal team capable and ready to go. But one of the things I want to dig into is one thing that you just mentioned a moment ago is sales plans. And so this is one area that I find that a lot of small to medium-sized businesses mess up on a lot because they usually expect their salespeople or maybe their sales leader comes in with a plan that he used at or she used at the previous place that they worked at, and they just kind of put it in and run with it, not knowing that things maybe need to be optimized for their current processes or size or scope of business. Do you see that often?
Yeah, I mean, usually the sales team or whoever came up with a plan.
Yeah.
And it's understandable and it makes sense. And I think anytime you're working on these, the sales team has to be part of the design, right? They have to be part of the input. And at the same time, you can't just let them define it, because of course it's going to work out in their favor, right? I mean, you're letting them kind of put together their own pay plan. So yeah, I think you have to really a lot of where this sales comp gets, I don't want to say complicated, but what you really need to do is do all the modeling, right? Like all the scenarios, all the planning. It's like, if you do X and Y, we're going to pay out this much, but if you were to do that, what's the revenue going to look like? So again, it's how much revenue am I going to get? What's it going to cost me in terms of my sales comp? What's that ratio, and does that work for me as a business? And you want to work with things like, floors and maxes and ceilings and accelerators and all those kind of pieces of it. But you got to do it in a way that, everybody besides the sales team is also comfortable. The CFO is comfortable. The CEO is comfortable. Everybody goes, okay, yeah, we can afford that. So I think it's really one of those things you got to get a lot of people involved in it, because everybody's got a point of view on it. And of course, the sales team will figure out the way to maximize their payout. They will find all the little quirks, all the little pieces in the process where they're like, if I do this, then I get this. They will figure that out really quickly. So you don't have to worry about them, maximizing it. You just have to kind of try to think through all of those. And this isn't like a game where you're trying to like beat them or anything like that, but it's like the whole company's gotta win with this, and we can't just be spending a lot of money without getting the revenue for it.
Right.
But yeah, absolutely. I think, and that happens in a lot of different types of comp. I mean, not just sales plans, right? You'll see it. I was in healthcare for a lot of years, and my background and specialty is not physician comp, but I'm working with a physician comp team. You would go to these medical practices and look at the physician comp plan, and it's like, who came up with this? It's like, well, the doctors. Well, how are the doctors like experts in compensation, right? And so, but of course they put it together, and shockingly, it was to their benefit all the time. So you got to go in there and kind of, some of these things, be like, hey, look, I get it. It was very lucrative for you in the past, but in order for this company and this organization to sustain itself and be here in the next 3 to 5 years, we're going to have to make some changes to this. We still want to reward you for performance, and at the same time, we can't be, doing it at the expense of the P&L.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think that a lot of people, businesses and employees themselves forget that there's really 3 players that are important in any of these the situation like this. It's the employer, the employee, and the customer, right? So they all need to be thought of when we're putting solutions together. So yeah, love that. Yeah. So Greg, I mean, getting back to a little bit of the what do you see as really driving retention? And I want to kind of frame this in what's going on right now in the marketplace. And what do you see right now that's really driving the retention of top performers? Is it pay? Is it manager quality? Lack of growth? Is there what is that? What's the biggest driver you're seeing right now?
You touched on the managers, and it's one of the key stats in Gallup's research. We all look at Gallup in terms of engagement. I think the most concerning thing for organizations should be that their managers are almost as disengaged as their frontline people. So how are you going to engage your employees if the people who are supposed to engage them are also not engaged? I think a lot of that comes down to just people not having any sort of connection to the organization. And what I mean by that is we've gone through a period of time here where the world was already getting what I would say less connected. Technology being the driver. So technology is driving us to be efficient with our connections. So we get on Teams, we get on Slack, we send emails, we rarely get together with each other outside of sitting in a meeting, which everybody pretty much hates, right? I mean, everybody has the meme of, this meeting could have been an email, right? So we got people that don't have a reason to want to get together other than work. We've made it more automated with technology. Then we get into COVID. We all go home, and we tried this thing called hybrid workplaces coming out of that, where not everybody's in the office at the same time. And even if they are, we're all in the office with our doors closed on the same Teams meeting that, we have to have now. That's how we're having stuff. On top of that, now we're in this age of everybody's scared about their job because of AI. And I think a lot of companies are trying to address this in a way that is very top down, meaning they're like, well, let's have this on-site. We'll bring everybody on. We used to have off-sites, right? Now we have on-sites.
Yeah.
So we're going to have an on-site where everybody's going to get together and we're going to, talk to each other and try to get to know each other and build connection. There's nothing wrong with that, but there's a lot of people who don't even like the on-site because being in a big room full of people is not really something that they love doing, right? They get a little anxious, it drains their energy. So I think that companies are trying to connect, but I think they're trying to do it very in a system program rollout type of way, as opposed to talking to the managers or the leaders and say, like, who are the people that you work with that you don't really know? Like if you were to say, like, who do you actually know that works here? What do you know about them? Or who do you get an email from that you've never talked to voice to voice? You've never had a conversation with them. You work with them, you send them emails, you never talk to them. Who is that person? And could you talk to them for 15 minutes this week? Not about work, not about a work problem. Just like something, hey, we trade emails. I see your name all the time. I don't know anything about you. How'd you get here? How'd you get in this role? How'd you get to this company? Like, tell me your backstory. Tell me that stuff. I think you start to do some of that and the leaders make it important and the leaders make it a priority, kind of talk to people to foster these conversations and these connections outside of just the regular team meetings. I'm not saying like do an icebreaker at your next team meeting and we'll go around and like have everybody talk about themselves because people hate that too. It's not the most efficient because it's one-on-one, but at the same time, it's probably more effective than trying to get people in a group and say, like, let's build connection. Connection comes through conversations. You've got to talk to people. You got to get to know people. And I was doing a workshop this past week with a bunch of executives. They're in an executive development group. And we were talking about this idea of disconnectedness. And I said, how many of you have ever had a leader that really you thought was great at connecting? And one guy raised his hand and I said, okay, tell me about that leader. What did that leader do? He said the thing he did every single day when he came to work was he talked to everybody. He talked to them about what was going on. He got to know them. He had conversations with them. He took an interest in them. And I said, okay, well, what was the impact of that? He's like, hardly anybody left. People loved working for him. They loved working hard for him. It was a great team. It was probably one of the best teams I've ever been a part of. And so I said, so his priority was connection over everything else. His priority was like, how do I get to know my people? How do I connect with them? How do I see them? How do I make them feel like they want to be here? And everything else took care of itself. The team performance, the retention, all those things took care of themselves. And so I think what organizations do a lot of is let's have a program that we can say we're addressing engagement and retention, but they're not saying it's over everything else. Leaders, your priority is to get to know your people and talk to them and have conversations and sort of build that connection, because out of that, everything else will take care of itself. It's hard. I get it. And it's a little soft, to be honest, like we're compensation people, so we understand what soft looks like in the HR world. But at the same time, it's more effective than most of these other initiatives that people are rolling out.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I totally believe in that, that the importance of connection. I spent the last month in Japan, and some of my work there was I noticed that companies are really focus on connecting first. And a lot of their people are hired in cohorts. They come in, they move through the organization together as part of a team, a shared team, so they know each other quite well. And also, we've all heard of them going out after work and spending time and celebrating successes and so forth. And those things really bring that culture together, especially when it's not about pay for them. It's about the quality of work, that connectivity that they have among people. And then that connectivity is what's really driving performance in their organizations. So I found that fascinating. In the United States, we really focus a lot on pay and kind of a more of a coin-operated type of approach. And the real power is the connectivity between people and understanding what they do on a daily basis and how that impacts the customer and the reputation of the company.
Yep.
So great stuff.
Well, I would also argue, and it's probably, people would challenge me on this, if I were to teach your employees how to connect better internally, almost internal networking, your organization would be way more effective. Like, I'm not just talking about managers. I'm saying, if I could give you some things to do a little bit each week, and it's not getting in a Slack channel and it's not anything like that, but it's like, here's some things I want you to focus on during this week. Your teams would function better. They'd work better across the organization. They'd collaborate better. They'd make decisions faster. You'd have far fewer escalations, and you'd generally have happier people, more engaged people, because there would be people that there's a reason for them to be there, and there's a reason for them to get to know people, and all those other issues kind of take care of themselves. And then you can even look outward especially if it's a smaller company or even a big company, I guess. How do your employees go out in the world and think about what you do in the world? And is that part of when they go out and they connect with people, not to go find new jobs because they're going to like their jobs so much because all the people they connected with, but as they go out and they meet other people, they're going to be sort of people who attract others to your company, right? Yeah. They're sort of like your ambassadors, right? Because they're out networking, they're like, hey, come work here, or reconnecting with people that left, boomerangs, like turning them into people that can be connectors that bring great talent into your organization. So it seems like when I say to people, hey, I'm going to teach people how to network better or connect better, everybody's thinking, oh, well, then they're going to go get other jobs. There's a lot of other reasons to grow your network other than that. And if you create an environment they're connected to, it's not that they're going to be thinking, hey, I need to go work somewhere else.
Right. Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. But let's double down on what you just said and make this a little bit more practical for the leaders that are listening in. So if an executive team wants to strengthen that retention, the feel of togetherness, that connection between their coworkers, what should they do over the next 90 days to really foster this environment?
Number one, they need to model that behavior. So I would say executive leaders need to get to know people on other teams. So if I had an executive leadership team, I would challenge them to start working on meeting people on other teams. And they have to all be open to that, right? Because this leader's going to reach out to their team and say like, hey, let's have a short conversation. Let's talk about what it is, you're doing, what's going on in your career, or what questions do you have for me? And make it not so much about the performance they have now, but kind of getting to know them, right? Again, who are they as a person? What are their hopes and dreams and fears and all those kind of things? So I would say the first thing is kind of modeling that and having them connect across the organization. Secondly, I would say they need to then challenge their teams to do similar things. So, a real simple thing is I say, if you're in a team and team meeting, you're like, your job this week is to find somebody who you either trade messages with on email or Slack or whatever that you've never talked to. Set up a 15-minute conversation, just have a conversation with them and talk to them, kind of get to know who they are. And then, when people do that, or they connect and they come back and they say, hey, I had this great conversation, celebrate that. Celebrate and recognize that connection and collaboration is a high value activity in this organization. Again, those sound like things you're like, okay, that seems like really kind of, you're just telling people to go talk to each other. Yeah, I am. We don't talk to each other enough. We don't talk to each other. And if I got to tell you, here's your goal, set up one 15-minute conversation with somebody that you trade messages with, but you never talk to, then do that. And then do it next week. And then start seeing where these connections lead and these things happen. I would say on the first one, if the leaders did that and they were reaching out to other people on other team, man, your internal mobility would go through the roof.
Yeah.
And your talent management, you would recognize, people would recognize talent in other teams. And they would be like, hey, I got this opportunity. There's this great person over there. And people get uncomfortable because you're stealing from my team now. But again, you got to all be open to that. And it makes the organization stronger. But that by itself is a talent management strategy. That's better than sitting in a room for a week doing 9 boxes. You could do that and pretty much figure out where everybody's going to be going in the organization in the future.
Yes. I love that, Greg. I mean, and this is where it's all at. I mean, leaders need to know that compensation, pay strategy, it's not just about the dollars. It's about the things that surround the programs that make the program successful. So one thing I want all of the leaders listening in to walk away with is that when we think about retention and rewards, they're not separate levers. They kind of rise and fall together when we think about all the programs. So companies need to keep people informed, have good communication around programs, and to keep them feel grounded and make them know that growth is possible in the organization and pay is fair. So one thing, Greg, I just want to thank you so much about your spending time with us today, kind of going through this strategy, letting us know that there's solutions out there. I mean, for organizations that are growing quickly, they can hire a professional such as you to come in and help them true up their operations around compensation and rewards and retention and internal networking, as you said. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
So to everybody out there that is listening in, if this episode has helped, please subscribe, rate, and share this episode with a leader that needs help and really understanding how to improve retention, how to improve compensation operations, and of course, if they need a person like Greg, or of course, I'm in the same line of work as Greg. So, but if you're looking for some help, Greg, how should they reach out to you?
Yeah, they could go to retentionandrewards.com. That's my company page. That's a good way to get in touch with me, or you can follow me on LinkedIn. Just kind of search for me. You'll see it'll say the Introverted Networker on there, but that's me. You'll also see the Retention and Rewards banner at the top of the profile, but any of those ways are good ways to get in touch with me and have a conversation about what it is you're looking for.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. All right. Take care.